On a calm evening in a quiet neighborhood, the sun was just setting, casting warm orange light over the rows of small houses. Birds were settling in for the night, and families were finishing dinner or getting ready to relax. It was the kind of peaceful evening where nothing unusual ever happened, or so everyone thought. In one of those houses lived James, a hard-working man in his early 30s. He had a steady job, a loving wife, and 2 young kids. James took pride in his home, mowing the lawn every weekend and fixing things around the house himself. To his neighbors, he was just an ordinary guy who kept to himself and cared deeply about his family. Not far from James's house lived Officer Mitchell, a police officer who had been on the force for over 10 years. People in the community knew him well, some trusted him, others were more wary. Officer Mitchell was known to be strict and serious, often called in for tough situations. Most people believed he was doing his job, but a few had quietly questioned his approach. That evening something happened that no one in the neighborhood expected. James was about to face a situation that would change his life forever. What started as a simple police visit soon spiraled into confusion and fear. But what happened next shocked everyone, and it was all caught on camera. The story that unfolded would not only shake the neighborhood, but would also reveal truths no one was ready to face. Late that evening, just as the neighborhood was settling into quiet, flashing red and blue lights suddenly lit up the street outside James's house. A police car pulled up slowly in front of his porch, its engine humming low but firm. The sudden noise startled James, who was just about to sit down with his family for a movie night. Before he could even step outside to see what was happening, Officer Mitchell was already at the door, knocking hard. When James opened it, his face was calm but curious. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. Without warning, the officer stepped forward with a stern look. "You're trespassing," he said sharply. "This isn't your house." James blinked in confusion. "What? This is my home. I live here. You can check the records." But Officer Mitchell wasn't listening. His tone grew harsher as he accused James of lying. "You're not supposed to be here. Step outside." James's heart started pounding, but he stayed calm. "Officer, I live here with my family. You can ask my neighbors if you want." Meanwhile, from across the street, neighbors gathered at their windows and doorsteps. Some whispered to each other, stunned and confused. They had never seen anything like this before. Why was a man being accused of trespassing at his own home? Despite James's protests and pleas, Officer Mitchell suddenly grabbed his arm and tried to push him out the door. "You need to come with me." "Please, you're making a mistake," James said, struggling to stay calm. "My wife and kids are inside, they're scared." The front door opened, and James's wife appeared, tears in her eyes. "What's going on? Why are you taking him?" she cried out, reaching for her husband. But the officer ignored her, pulling out handcuffs and snapping them around James's wrists. James's children peeked from behind the curtains, their faces full of confusion and fear. Neighbors looked on helplessly as James was led away, his voice breaking as he pleaded, "I'm in my own home. Please." The police car drove off, leaving a stunned silence over the street. Everyone was left wondering what had just happened, and why. But the truth was about to come out, and it was all caught on camera. The very next day, the atmosphere in the neighborhood was heavy with confusion and worry. People whispered about what had happened to James the night before. But then something unexpected happened. James's wife found the security camera footage from their front door. It showed everything clearly. The video started with James walking up the steps, keys in hand, just like any other evening. He unlocked the door, stepped inside calmly, and closed it behind him. There was no sign of trouble. The footage showed his children playing inside, his wife moving around the living room. A peaceful home, just as James had said. Then the police officer appeared at the door. But unlike the calm James, the officer was tense, his voice raised and his movements harsh. He pushed against the door frame, ordering James to step outside. James didn't argue. He stayed calm, explaining that this was his house, his family's home. But Officer Mitchell ignored all of it. His tone grew sharper, his grip rougher as he tried to force James out. The footage showed the moment the officer grabbed James's arm and cuffed him. all while James pleaded quietly, trying not to make a scene. Neighbors gathered to watch the footage, their faces turning from confusion to shock. How could this happen? How could a man be treated like a criminal in his own home? James's wife watched with tears in her eyes, relief mixing with pain. At last the truth was clear. James had done nothing wrong. The security footage did more than prove James's innocence. It showed the officer's unnecessary aggression, the way he had acted without cause. People started asking hard questions. Was this about racism? Was the officer abusing his power? How often had this happened to others who didn't have a camera to tell the truth? As the video spread through the community and online, Officer Mitchell's story began to fall apart. His claims of trespassing no longer held any weight. The camera had spoken louder than words. The peaceful neighborhood that once trusted the police now faced a harsh reality. Sometimes justice needs witnesses, and sometimes those witnesses come in the form of a small security camera, watching quietly, but telling the whole story. When the security footage went public, the neighborhood was shaken to its core. People who had once felt safe and trusting now felt confused and angry. Many spoke out loudly against what they saw. How could an officer treat a man like James, an honest, hard-working father, like a criminal in his own home? The video was clear, and it left little room for doubt. Neighbors held small meetings, sharing their feelings of betrayal. "This shouldn't happen here," one woman said. "We trusted the police to protect us, not to scare us in our own homes." The anger grew stronger as more people realized this was not just one mistake, it was part of a bigger problem. Local activists and civil rights groups quickly got involved. They organized rallies and started petitions calling for justice. Flyers appeared on street corners and posts flooded social media, demanding accountability. They spoke about racism and abuse of power, saying that James's case was sadly not unique. Many others had suffered in silence, without cameras to prove the truth. James's family went through a whirlwind of emotions. At first, they were scared for their safety, and scared of what might come next. Then, anger took over. How could this happen to them? How could someone sworn to serve the community treat them so unfairly? But as the support poured in, hope began to grow. They weren't alone anymore. People stood with them, demanding justice and change. Despite the growing public pressure, the local police department stood firm, initially defending Officer Mitchell. They said he was following procedure and suggested that James might have confused the officer. This only made the community feel more betrayed and frustrated. It was as if the system was protecting its own, not the people it was supposed to serve. The tension in the neighborhood thickened. Friends who once trusted the police now questioned every interaction. Parents worried about their children. The fear, anger, and hope all mixed together, making it clear that things couldn't stay the same. The community wanted answers, and they wanted justice. After days of growing pressure from the community and activists, the police department finally announced an internal investigation into the incident. Officials said they would review all the evidence, including the security footage that had shocked so many people. For many, this was a small step, but a step forward. As the investigation moved forward, the footage was handed over to a higher authority outside the local police department. Independent reviewers watched the video closely and agreed with what everyone had already seen. James was innocent, and Officer Mitchell had acted unjustly. Then came the biggest shock of all. During the investigation, it was uncovered that Officer Mitchell was not new to controversy. Records showed he had been involved in several similar incidents over the years, cases where people accused him of using unnecessary force or mistreating those he was supposed to protect. But these complaints had been quietly handled, dismissed, or forgotten. No real consequences had followed. The true motives behind Officer Mitchell's behavior began to surface. Interviews and past reports suggested bias and a troubling misuse of power. The officer appeared to have judged people unfairly, especially those who looked or acted differently from him. It was a painful truth for the community to face. This was not an isolated mistake, but part of a deeper problem. Hearing this, the neighborhood's demands for justice grew louder and stronger than ever. They organized protests, held town hall meetings, and made their voices impossible to ignore. This is about more than one man, a community leader said. It's about fairness, respect, and the right to feel safe in your own home. Through all the chaos and pain, James and his family found something unexpected: strength. They leaned on each other and on the community around them. Their fear slowly turned into hope, and their anger into determination. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they were united in the fight for what was right. In a neighborhood that had once been silent, a powerful message was rising: no one should be afraid in their own home, and those who abuse their power must be held accountable. After weeks of investigation and public outcry, the police department finally took action. Officer Mitchell was suspended from duty, and soon after, he was officially fired. The decision sent shockwaves through the community. For many, it was a sign that their voices had been heard, and that justice, though slow, was beginning to take shape. But the consequences didn't stop there. Officer Mitchell faced legal charges related to his actions that night. The case moved forward with a growing sense of hope that accountability would reach beyond just losing a job. It was a clear message: no one is above the law, especially those sworn to protect the public. Meanwhile, James and his family began the long process of healing. The trauma of that night left deep scars, scars that couldn't be erased by justice alone. Yet surrounded by friends, neighbors and supporters, they slowly found peace. Their home, once a place of fear, started to feel safe again. They knew the path ahead would have challenges, but they also knew they weren't alone. The neighborhood, inspired by James's story and the courage of those who spoke out, began to push for real change. Meetings were held, and petitions were signed, calling for better police training, stronger community oversight, and clearer rules to prevent abuses of power. The people wanted a future where no family would have to face what James did. Though the past couldn't be changed, standing up for what is right was changing the future. The neighborhood's faith in justice was not broken, it was renewed. And through their unity, they sent a powerful message: respect, fairness, and truth must always come first, no matter the uniform someone wears. This story reminds us how important property rights are, the simple right to feel safe and secure in your own home. It also shines a light on racial justice and the need for institutions like the police to be held accountable when they misuse their power. When those sworn to protect instead cause harm, it affects not just one family, but an entire community. The security camera, a small piece of technology, played a huge role in revealing the truth. Without it, James's story might have been forgotten or misunderstood. It shows how powerful evidence can be in fighting injustice, giving a voice to those who might otherwise be ignored. But technology alone isn't enough. This story calls on all of us to stay aware, to speak up when we see something wrong, and to stand with those who face unfair treatment. Empathy and vigilance are the first steps toward real change. At the heart of it all is a simple truth: everyone deserves respect and dignity, no matter who they are, what they look like, or where they live. Protecting those rights is not just a law or a rule, it's a promise we make to each other as members of a community, and that promise must never be broken.